Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bollywood Cinema Club, where we take a look at Indian cinema once every other week. I am the host of the Culture Cast, Chris Dashu, and I'm joined by my good friend. You can find her here every now and then. You've been on this a couple times. Big fan of Amir Khan, head of the United States branch of the Amir Khan fan club. Over at Mondo Heather, you can find her writing and doing all kinds of interesting stuff. You're a friend of mine, Heather Drain.
Hello, and I hope everybody has their Amir Khan altars ready.
And a good Amir Khan to you as well.
Yes, the Amir Khan. Thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of been a running theme here with you and I doing Bollywood cinema stuff that we're talking about Amir Khan movies. And this episode is no different, because on this episode, we're going to be talking about 1997's Indra Kumar directed Ishq. So the film is directed by Indra Kumar. The film is roughly translated to mean love. And boy, if you couldn't figure that out by watching the movie, well, if you don't know what Ishq means by the end of the movie, I feel like you weren't paying attention, because they say it a lot in like half of the songs even. And the film is all about Ajay Devgan and Amir Khan as Ajay and Raja, essentially using their real names, frankly. Two friends who get kind of mixed up in a love square, featuring Kajol playing Kajal and Juhi Chawla playing Madhu. And then their fathers get involved, Ajay's father and Juhi's father. And yeah, it's there's a lot going on. And if you can't tell, this movie is, well, it's not complicated, but there's a lot. It's 2 hours and 48 minutes, and I probably haven't even done the plot of the movie any real justice, but I'm sure we're going to talk about it. But Heather, you hadn't seen this. I hadn't seen this, so I want to turn the floor over to you and tell me what you think a little bit about Ishq.
Well, Ishq, now when you'd pitched this to me, like we both watched the trailer together, and it looked suitably kind of wacky, nutty.
Yep.
Lots of energy. And
I think that was the reason, right? Like, that's why we picked it, because it looked weird.
It looked very weird and demented and fun, and it had Amir Khan, and which that's...
It's like three-quarters of it right there.
You're not wrong. But I was excited. I will give everybody a heads up. There are like other movies called Ishq. So look for this one. If you're trying to watch this one, look for Amir Khan. And I believe this one came out 1997.
Mm-hmm. And it's on YouTube. The link to the movie is in the podcast description, because it's not only on YouTube, it's on YouTube with 100% correct American subtitles, which is fantastic. So
it does not always happen.
No, not only does it not always happen, when it happens like this, it makes everybody's life easier. You, the listener, for being able to find it, and us, because if it's hard for us to find it, it's not going to be any easier for you to find it. So, exactly. Which I think is like Ghulam in a nutshell, more or less. That was hard to find. This one is just readily available. So
that I am not allergic to Amir Khan, but I am allergic to the convoluted plot of this movie. And more accurately, because the film opens with the whole thing with the fathers being super rich, and they not only have a distaste for lower class, which in their world, I think everybody who's not rich is poor. Like, it's literally, if you're not rich, you're a beggar.
Like disgustingly rich.
Yeah. And they are like almost cartoonishly horrible.
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it.
And for me, that hurt a lot of this film, was anything with the fathers, because I don't know. Maybe it's my interclass warfare. Maybe it's my proletariat side that's just like, like, damn, I don't want to see the 1% or their equivalent, get anything other than a massive, like, Seth Rollins style curb stomp to the dick.
I get it. I'm right there with you, obviously.
And there's a lot. And these dads are terrible. And just when you think there's redemption, it gets even worse. And we'll get to that, I'm sure, in a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
It's way worse. And I mean, Jesus, like, this is, it's so much. Now, I will say there is a middle section of this film that is so weird and gets so off the rails that I kind of like did a little bit of a turnaround, and I was like, you know what? I'm kind of loving this movie. Then it got back to the dads, and I was like, but the cast playing the young lovers, all four of them are really great. I think I love Amir Khan's, like, he has really good chemistry with actually both AJ who's his rich friend, as well as his love interest with Madhu, because initially they hate each other, which is what you think of when we talked about Madhu, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the Madhu was a better movie. Madhu was a much better movie, but this one does have some, I think, things I did enjoy about it. And the friendship. Did you almost feel like, though, like the male friends were kind of more in love with each other? I mean, seriously.
I think what's funny about this movie is, as someone who's now seen similar of this kind of movie before, it's weird to me how weird this movie seems to me, even having seen other movies in Indian cinema like this one. Because, like you just mentioned, not only are the leads like having the male leads have this weird chemistry together that, like you said, is kind of homoerotic in a way, like unintentional or intentional, however you want to perceive it. But their relationship is rather close. It's weird because like this movie is deathly serious in a lot of spots, but yet it's trying to be funny. It's trying to be fun and funny. It's so tonally confused. It makes Muthu look like it knew what it was doing.
Oh my God. Yeah, no.
Right?
It did, but like Muthu is such a gleeful movie. It's such a light, other than that one weird bit of tonal whiplash, which we talked about on that episode. But for the most part, Muthu is kind of consistently just nutty and fun, and but also like the characters that the bad guys in that, we're not with them a ton. Like we're with Muthu a ton, and that helps. Like I think the dads get way too much, and also they go to fucking ridiculous, awful. Like I mean, like they should be in prison.
Did you forget that these people you're doing these things to one of them is your children, like your child? Yeah. I mean, that's the problem with this movie that I kind of, by the end of it, was experiencing was it feels like there's two movies here, odds with each other. There's the story of Ajay and Raja and Kajol and Madhu, and that like the love kind of triangle, rectangle, square, however you want to interpret it. And then the story of two fathers who are trying to prevent their families from falling apart best they can believe and tell. And it would make sense if the characters that were the antagonists that were doing things to the protagonist weren't related to them. I would totally understand the lengths that they're going to. But the fact that these are these kids' parents, at least half of them, that's their parents, it's insane to me, the lengths that they go to, because they almost kill their own kids multiple times.
Yes. And
it's like, what is even the point here then? If you're willing to kill your own kid, what is even the point of what you're trying to do then? Trying to prevent them from marrying someone you don't want them to. Because it's the whole crux here is the two rich dads want their son and daughter to get married and they fall in love with other people. It's Midsummer's Night's Dream, right? I mean, there's a little bit of, it's this Shakespearean thing again that we kind of talked about last time, where it's everything feels very grand and connected, and it's here too, but all the stuff around it is really tonally strange, almost to the point of harming the movie overall, frankly.
Yes. And I mean, especially because with the film being so long, because like it's like the first sort of big dastardly thing the dads do is they're like talk with the lawyer who basically, suggests to them, well, you could get them to sign this marriage like certificate, but basically act like, oh, here's the property I'm going to sign off to you.
Right.
And they're like, oh, I bet they won't pay attention. Now you do have like the character of the uncle on the dads. This is how I kept the dad characters differentiated in my head. One of them was Lex Luthor.
Yes.
That's
Dalip Tahil, who looks hilarious, frankly. He looks
that mustache. I love it when at one point this poor guy uses his head to strike a match. I like that guy. And the other guy I refer to as Shouty Man because he's very loud. And I loved it when granted, how did you feel when Amir Khan's character like dresses up as his friend's dad? Like,
oh yeah, it's pretty great.
And but it's like him shouting his title. Amir Khan's such a treasure, and But yeah, so I mean, but that's bad enough. You're knowingly hoodwinking your children, your grown adult children.
Yep.
Into marriage, and especially in a culture where I'm assuming divorce is probably not highly looked upon. Like, I don't know that. I don't know that about Indian culture. Is that, you know, like
the level of how conservative Indian culture is, I would assume that it's not necessarily something that people are going out and doing all the time.
Right. I mean, I know it happens.
Right.
I don't, you know, because I'm assuming this partially just because I feel like if it was as common as it is here, the movie would just be like, oh, cool, I'll marry her and then we'll divorce a month later. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
But then again, I'm applying logic to Ishq, and that's maybe on me. That's my
yeah, because there are things that happen in this movie that happen without logic almost entirely. And there's a whole act of this movie that involves Ajay and Madhu thinking that Kajol and Raja, Amir Khan, are having sex with each other and had a baby and then had it aborted. Like all.
Oh, okay, that's what she meant. I wondered because she's like, oh, are you having another baby? And I was like, another baby? Like, why did I miss? I didn't know what she meant by the other.
Yeah, because they're like, oh, she must have been pregnant. It's what's fucking insane about this movie is you have these two dads who go to the ends of the earth to prevent their son and or daughter from marrying someone that's, quote, lower class, unquote. But the lengths that they go to are like, that is not the way real human beings treat one another if you're family. And what's hard to really kind of reconcile with this movie is by the end of the movie, ostensibly all the characters forgive one another. And I don't know how they could.
That's, oh God.
Right? Because like that's the emotional climax of the movie is they all forgive one another. And I'm thinking to myself, if I were in that scenario or even writing this script, why? Why are you giving them any amount of redemption when they've done nothing to deserve it? And that's probably my biggest complaint with this entire movie is it feels like it doesn't understand its own stakes. It like sets these grandiose stakes. And then by the end of it goes, well, it wasn't really that big of a deal. They were able to forgive their fathers in the end. It's like, I would never, ever in a million years forgive my father who tried to kill me, not once, not twice, but seemingly 3 goddamn times to the point where he was trying to get the woman that I'm in love with raped. Like that's what was going on. Like, even if it was ostensibly fake, still what it looked like, still what she assumed was going on. It's just fucking insane.
Well, and especially because it's you mentioning the stakes, I think is the best way to put it. Because if you're going to be a comedy, then honestly, they should have just left the big mystique to be the marriage paper. Don't have people getting almost killed or certainly borderline raped or, you know, on top of that, because this the whole thing is poor Rachel. It's all right. I was thinking of Amir Khan. That's why I said it.
Yeah, always.
Always. Yeah. But yeah, it's like her reputation, is just like completely crapped on.
Right.
It's like, oh, she's not a clean girl. And like her uncle taxi driver guy is bribed to lie at this party, you know, and that's the worst thing is she like, they frame it all with like somebody took pictures of Amir Khan, of Raja comforting her after she's been almost raped and beaten and terrified. And they're not making out. Like he's literally, you could tell, like he's just like, oh, you know, comforting this poor woman who's terrified.
The most amazing stills. They just took stills from filming the movie and used it as slides. It was amazing. They're like perfectly shot pictures from behind.
Different angles. I know. Like what, they had multiple?
Sitting you didn't notice and hear all those clicking noises and flashballs?
Yeah, right? I know. Well, and got it developed that fast in an era before digital.
Yeah, it's so funny because they're like, we want to show you these slides. Like, let us show you these slides of all these terrible things. And instead of Ajay believing his friend, like, you know, you would, honestly, it's so unrealistically written. It's like if your friend at your wedding is, you know, shows up late and he tells you, hey, we ran into some trouble because your dad tried to stop us from getting here. Something, you know, your dad's already trying to do.
Yeah.
And you believe him telling you, well, they were off in cahoots fucking and that's why they're not here, and they were going to have an abortion, I guess. And he just believes everybody else but his own friend. Like, that to me is almost a unforgivable writing sin. It's so lazy and so contrived. That's the best term to use for this movie is beyond contrived. Not necessarily a bad thing, because I think the movie towards the end understands that it's kind of getting into the contrived land, but it really should have just gone all out from the get-go and not second-guessed itself. I think if it had just really embraced how over the top it's trying to be, instead of trying to ground it in reality while being over the top, I think the tonal inconsistencies in the movie may have kind of just melted away, because instead of having to try and reground the movie every 20 minutes, they could just say, well, everything is insane and fantastical realism, and who cares? Like, it's a big love story about 4 friends who keep getting the world involved in their problems, and the world keeps involving itself. Like, that's the story, and make it feel that way. Make it less the fathers and more the world, large, which can be fueled by the fathers, but don't make it so grounded in reality, I think is the best way of putting it. Like, it feels like it's trying to be real, but over the top at the same time.
Yeah. Well, and that whole latter section just really, really, for me, hampered the movie hard. Because everything up to then, there was inconsistencies, but it was at least spaced out where there'd be, something really funny and crazy. Okay, the dad sucked. But then it'd be back to being kind of funny. And I will say, so I don't sound like a total negative Nancy, my favorite, I have a lot of favorite things from this movie, as much as I didn't care for the whole thing. The whole thing with the statue, where there's this whole thing in the mall where this I guess this shop clerk has sculpted the statue of like an Aphrodite type, in honor of some weird rich guy. I wasn't quite clear on his title.
Right.
And AJ accidentally breaks it and then puts it back together, but he puts it where it's her frontal legs, her ass is now where her vagina should be.
Yeah.
And then everything else is normal. So she looks kind of like that scene in Spaceballs where
nobody told me my ass was this big.
You started scratching it. So, but what cracks me up is when the guy gets there, the rich guy, and he's like, this is brilliant. But then still tries to have the guy killed. But you notice how the statue now has the ass, like somebody sculpted it to all stick together.
Yeah.
like that was stupid, but it made me laugh. And when the one bad guy, one of the many bad guys, were somehow through the advantageous action of, I believe it was Kajal, that kind of tipped over a lit candle and sets his crotch on fire. And then he's knocked out on the ground and they start stomping on his crotch. And they're like, oh, everybody. There's like 30 guys stomping on his dick. That shit's funny. Okay.
They will never not be funny to watch, but stomped on a guy's wiener.
This is my ugly American side coming out. You could maybe blame the fact that I saw a lot of America's Funniest Home Videos as a child. Somebody getting stomped, their groin stomped or hit or whatever. It's funny. I can't help it. I don't write
It's funny in any language. That's why they're doing it in this movie. You know what? The funniest thing that you can do actually is covering yourself in lighter fluid and trying to light yourself on fire. It's such a weird movie. Like, there are some things that happen in this movie that feel like they're from another movie. Like Kajol, I'm just gonna call her Kajol because the movie barely put in any effort to give her character a different name. They switched one letter in her name. You know who this is. She was in DDLJ and Kuch Kuch Hota High and K3G. What do you mean? Just give her name. They just called him Amir Khan in the movie, frankly. She tries to kill herself by lighting herself on fire at one point. Like, what movie are we watching? What is this? Yeah. What are you trying to tell us here? Is the question, because I'm just confused.
I mean, the same movie that has a guy getting his dick set on fire and then stomped out by 30 people. It's the same movie that has this poor, depressed woman who's so depressed that she has to go to the hospital because it's affecting her physically.
Yeah.
And then tries to kill herself. It's the same movie that has dick stomping and a statue with a booty. But Oh, also there's this stunt work, and it's funny because we talked about terrifying stunt work and when we recorded the episode for Gulam. I think this actually terrified me more is when AJ sees the girl he's falling in love with, Kajal, and she's at the building that's only connected to by this pipes off. Like, how high do you think that was? That looked like at least 12 stories.
Yeah, so high you wouldn't catch me doing that.
Oh my God. I didn't even like watching it.
It reminds me of Gulam. Remember in Gulam where Amir Khan is climbing on the outside of the building in that movie? Like, what? Oh, hey, by the way, let's just kill our actor. It's like, oh my God. Because Amir Khan walks out onto this thing. I don't know how they were doing this. I mean, I'm assuming a lot of it's just close shots and then, far shots with stunt doubles, I'm assuming, but they do a good enough job editing it together. I can't see the strings. Let's just put it that way.
Well, I mean, honestly, there's one shot from like a bottom kind of slanted angle and it looks like AJ. It looks like that actor.
Very well could have been. I mean, again, Amir Khan was doing his own stunts in Gulam, so.
I mean, and it didn't look like, I feel like they were doing enough camera angles to be like, see, we don't have anything to cushion this at all. Like, so good luck.
You guys remember when Amir Khan was racing against that train? Just as dangerous here. We don't care. It's all for the shot. It's for the movie. It's for the movie.
And then they have this handyman who is like a gore. It's all thinking like he's handicapped, but he's handicapped on such a level that doesn't exist in reality.
Right.
Where he's like, yeah, like I can't do it. But
yeah.
Yeah. And of course that's who you want to have.
That's just be us for an hour just making that noise at one another. Is that drinking out of a fucking jug with 3 X's on it?
That's
That's not what that noise is. That is not what that noise is.
That's the Southern version, though. And Chris and I, you've had some family reunions with those jugs.
Yeah, that movie would be called Ishq.
Ishq.
That movie would be called Ishq.
That movie would be called That Boring, right?
It like, you know what? I gotta give him credit for really putting Amir Khan and Ajay Devgan through the ringer, because even if they weren't doing that stunt, I couldn't tell. So I'm with you. Like, probably they were realistically. Like, if Amir Khan was willing to run at that train, it would stand to reason he's probably willing to go and walk out onto this, I guess, like tube pipes connecting buildings. Like, it's
very thin.
My favorite part of that scene is him making that noise. Just over and over again for 5 minutes, just him making noises.
Oh my God, no. And, that's the thing is, I know people are like, oh, Tom Cruise does his stunts, which is impressive. Listen, I'm not going to take away anything from Tom Cruise because he's doing stuff I wouldn't want to do. Unless I was paid as much as him, then I'd be like, well, I've got that insurance money. So, but anywho, I mean, I'm sorry. You watch these Indian films, hold my beer. I don't drink, but hold my water because, like, holy shit. Yeah. That's stunt work. Like, if you mess up, you're dead. There's no, like, you're going to get injured. Like, if they had fallen off of that.
Well, it's like you mentioned on the Gulam episode with Jackie Chan, right? Like,
yeah,
he was doing all kinds of stuff, and some of the most innocuous looking things were the most dangerous. Like, when he almost died, I think, jumping from the tree to the wall in one of those Operation Condor movies. He's like almost died from what was seemingly like a very kind of innocuous stunt that he was doing. So when they're in between buildings with, again, seemingly no safety, I can't, like, Indra Kumar does a good enough job of convincing us as the audience that there were no safety harnesses or wires. I've got to believe that there was. I've got to believe there was, but it's weird. Like, this is not the kind of movie that would necessitate or even require kind of scene.
No, what's weird is the payoff for it felt like it came straight out of an early 80s like sex comedy for me, where they crash into a woman's bathroom. It landed in her tub, except, a little more conservative culture. She's like clothed in the bathtub. Like, she's wearing a full bodysuit and like a wraparound
like
skirt.
a boo-boo or a sari, probably.
It's
when it's wet and clinging to your body, it kind of doesn't matter what it is, frankly.
That is a movie. And that to me felt, I mean, just straight like out of an early, which isn't, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just, but it goes to show you just this film, if it was like EKG meter, it would be like huge valleys, huge peaks. You need to be on some medicine, maybe to even out your blood pressure a little bit.
But if you're evening out, doesn't it mean that the movie's flatlining?
Oh, that's an excellent point.
And that's the thing. Like, I guess for me, I was trying to think of, because again, like, why do I do this show, right? I do this show because I believe, as I'm sure you do now, having watched a fair amount of these movies with me, that this is a area of cinema that is ripe for Western, again, specifically American appreciation. And I was trying to think, like, what is a movie that Westerners would be able to look at and say, okay, this movie is like that movie. And I can't think of anything off the top of my head other than maybe some of these like more recent Katherine Heigl, Gerard Butler, Ashton Kutcher, Cameron Diaz action movie, comedy, romance movies. Because again, like the characters are in love in the movie. So that's a big part of it. And that's really the driving force behind the movie is the relationships between the characters. But they keep getting themselves into these wacky situations. So, but again, it's like not an action movie, but it is because the scene that you're talking about with the guy getting his dick stomped on, Amir Khan kills him, does he not? Like, right? Does Amir Khan kill this man later in the same scene?
Oh God, it's
with a fucking pitchfork?
Yeah, it's like, so now we have like 80s slasher type kills.
Right. It's so strange.
It's nutty. And AJ gets stabbed with a rake, the same pitchfork, but I guess it doesn't go in deep enough to...
Doesn't they get shot? Doesn't they get shot at one point? I mean, remember, there's a point where they're walking through the lobby of a hotel. This is earlier on in that scene, trying to get away from these guys that have been hired to kill them. And they just start shooting at a crowd of people and shoot a random bystander. And the guy's just like, my arm got hit with a bullet. What? That's weird. What? Yeah, no shit. What the fuck?
But they have the most blatantly Australian tourists. I'm surprised the guy didn't say, "Oh, crikey."
Did a dingo eat your babe?
A dingo ate my arm. Yeah, I can't.
It's so wild.
Australian listeners. But
it's so wild to me because the movie, I understand what the movie's going for. And again, having seen something like Muthu, I think it kind of gives you probably a better idea of what this movie's kind of trying to do. But I think if you were a Westerner approaching this for the first time, this movie would feel like Whiplash. Because it even felt like Whiplash, I think, for the two of us. But maybe not as much as it would if I hadn't seen other kinds of Indian cinema that, again, it's just matter of fact is what it feels like. Like, again, it doesn't feel like it needs to tie itself down to genre conventions, which I do appreciate about Indian cinema. It doesn't feel like it has to be a horror movie. It has to be an action movie. It has to be a romantic comedy. Like, it can kind of just do whatever the fuck it wants. And in a way that's confusing for me as a Westerner, but at the same time, it feels freeing that you can kind of just do whatever the fuck you want. And people are going to respond positively because this movie, immensely successful, third highest grossing film of 1997 when it came out. So,
wow. Well, you know why? Because there is one sequence that there's two, but of the musical numbers, there's one called Mr. Lover Lover.
Oh yeah.
And that was my favorite. That was great. It's the uncle, which I guess, of course, this is according to IMDb. Mileage is obviously going to vary, but that role was originally supposed to be Amitabh.
Which I guess. Like, Johnny Lever is a well-known Indian comedian. He's in Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, playing a similar character that he plays in this movie. I think, again, Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, I think, is a much better movie, but it's also doing something different. There's no action beats in that movie. But I couldn't see Amitabh in that role. I don't know. Like, it feels like he's too big of an actor to be that small of a character in this kind of movie.
Well, especially because it sounds like it wasn't like, oh, we're going to have him play the uncle. Like, the Mr. Lover Lover guy was going to be a separate character that comes out and gets the couples united, as opposed to the uncle, which I think is, we don't need any more extra characters.
All of a sudden, there's a third character arc here for someone else.
I mean, unless that character has a flamethrower and goes after both parents.
Right.
I mean, that's, to me, it's a dicey thing when you have, like, and there's plenty of movies where villains, I love a great villain. I think we all
Same.
do.
Yeah.
And, but the villain has to have some kind of charisma. Even if they're doing despicable thing, there has to be something where you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, you're even some part of you is like, oh, I don't mind. I love spending this character because yes, they're terrible, but they're fascinating or they're, appealing and somehow. This is not a good movie, but Alan Rickman in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves is by far the best part of that movie. And not just because he's Alan Rickman, but he just hams it up and is such a great villain. And it helps that everything around him is milquetoast.
Right. He really stands out.
He stands out. But he would, even if there were better, like if there was a better Robin Hood, like, cause it's like Alan Rickman's the kind of guy that could play a villain where even if the villain's doing some messy, he punches a horse. He tries to sexually assault Maid Marian in a really tacky camera angle that haunts me to this day. So thank you, movie, for that. But you still love him. The dads are just, and the actors, it's not the actors' fault. The actors, I think, are doing what they're expected to do, but they're so fucking off and not funny, awful. The shouty dad can be a little, but even it's like, they are so horrible. And I think especially for Americans where, I think we've become more and more aware. Now, the 1%'s always been terrible in this country. I'm not one of those people like, oh, everything went to shit after like 2016. No. Don't be naive. Read a book, everybody. It's long history of people with money doing horrible things for hundreds, if not thousands of years. But, it's like these guys are so bad and not in a fun way. And I don't know. I don't know if that's maybe me, though, where it's just like class issues do hit hard for me, and seeing like people get hurt and oppressed because of this bullshit, this poison that kind of has hurt so many in this world. I just can't.
It's not a whole lot of fun to see the real life. It's not a lot of fun when it's happening in real life, right?
Yes, maybe. I guess that's it, because it's, because I'm trying to process it, because there's plenty of movies where the bad guys, where there's a realism to it, but I still like the movie The Incident, from the late 60s with Martin Sheen and Tony Musante. It's a brilliant movie. And Musante he's pure magnetism in it, and his character is horrible and says atrocious things, but you're pulled to him because he's like a shark. But maybe it helps that The Incident is this gritty, kind of almost noir tone, black and white film, as opposed to this big budget, colorful movie with dick stomps. And at one point we have Amir Khan dressed up as a ghoul, pranking, which scene was awesome.
Oh my God, I completely forgot about that scene.
Did you forget Amir Khan with monster teeth? I was living.
You know why I forgot? Because it feels like it's from another movie, and it almost has no point being in this. To the point where the kind of reveal that it's all a gag. If it had never been revealed that it was a gag, a completely different, more successful movie than this one might have been. All of a sudden, it's just a vampire movie. Like, okay. Like, maybe, why not? Yeah. Like, why not at this point when this movie is kind of all over the place as it is anyways? They put a horror segment in this movie, and then they backed out of it because it wouldn't make any sense in the context of the movie. But that scene, for all intents and purposes, is like a 5-minute detour into the land of horror.
I like to think that somehow they knew years down the line there would be a redheaded lady in Arkansas.
This is for Heather Drain.
Yes, and it's like, we know what you want, baby. You want Amir Khan with some vampire in a little devil cat statue with glowing red eyes, and I'm like, yes, I do. How do you look into my soul and know what I need, movie? But then they gave me more of the 1% winning, and I was like, like, not having it.
Well, and I don't know if Amir Khan has been in a horror movie before, in Indian cinema. So I think he was in a film called Talash from 2012, but I don't like, I searched Amir Khan horror movie and, nothing comes up. So that's kind of interesting. This is as close as Amir Khan may have ever gotten to being in a horror movie.
Somebody needs to change that. And Chris, I don't know if you're thinking what I'm thinking, but I'm thinking, especially in this era where people love cross-pollinating big, I hate the term franchise films, but for lack of a better term, properties. And you take Amir Khan and you put him in the subspecies universe.
Oh, God.
With Radu. Gold, baby. You'll be wearing gold-plated diapers with us this time.
I mean, to be fair, I feel like Amir Khan would work in a vampire story, right? Like, yeah.
Yes. And I'm not just saying that because if I had any like fan art talent, I would have an online Tumblr account called AmirKhan as Dracula.com -Tumblr, whatever.
-AmirKhan.com.
Yeah. That's little heart eyes. But, and it's really well done, that little section too. Like it's like got every beat down, the lighting, the music. And everything's been so weird up to that point that I was like, oh, I was just ready to roll with it. I'm like, oh, sure.
Well, and it sets a weird precedent for the rest of the movie where some of the other things that take place in the movie later in the film, I find myself wondering, like, is this actually happening or is somebody like trying to mess with the other person? Like when Kajol tries to light herself on fire, I was thinking like, is she like trying to scare him the way he scared her and Madhu? It's like, no, this is for real. So it at times the movie feels like it's at odds with itself, but it does interesting things that I want to see. So it hurts the movie. Like that scene with Amir Khan where he's a vampire hurts the movie because it's from a completely different movie. And it just further pads out the 2-hour and 48 runtime of the movie. It further elongates how long this movie is. It's just, it kind of hurts the movie because I kind of want to see more of that and less of what we ended up getting. I would like to see a Amir Khan horror movie now. Like, that's something I would like to see.
Yeah.
That's not what this is, though. That's the problem. Like, the movie does such a good job at showing us some other things. Then it goes back to the thing that's just not that interesting. This story of two fathers who are just unrepentant assholes of the highest order. It's just, that's less interesting than almost everything else the movie's doing.
Right. Well, and I think especially because, you know, after the whole thing of AJ almost dying, you know, his father seems to have repentance, and it's and you can buy it.
Seems.
Yeah. I'm about to get to that because, you know, and that I could believe. I'm like, well, you know, it's easy to take life, you know, for granted until you or somebody you love, you know, is in a bad, perilous kind of situation where you're like, oh shit, you know, my actions could have very horrible, fatalistic consequences. And so I was willing to roll with that. I'm like, okay, there's redemption. You know, I think everybody in life, in real life, I think everybody's at least got a little tiny grain of sand and good in them. Some more than others, but you know, I think redemption's always possible for the most part. But then to have the whole like thing with the, you know, the not blackmail, but where they're trying to frame it at the wedding shower, what's equivalent to that is it's just like, what the fuck? And it's like, and then the rest of it is just so awful. It's just like good people suffering the movie, which doesn't fit in with the rest of the movie. I almost think they should have just had it be like, okay, AJ's in the hospital. He almost dies. His father feels bad. You know, Lex Luthor, it goes off, whatever. You know, he's pissed. Cool. Go have fun being a butthole, not having your daughter in your life. You don't deserve her. That's kind of maybe the ending I would have wanted, is both the fathers, just for the kids to be like, you know what? Being a father means more than just, you know, having to be genetically tied to me. A real parent doesn't act like this. A real parent does not treat me like this. And sayonara, suckers. And then and then, you know, Mr. Lover Man comes back and marries them in a group ceremony. And then Amir Khan's a vampire. And that's how it ends.
And it's a better movie for it.
Right.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, the third act of this movie is bizarre because that's when Kajol tries to kill herself. That's when Ajay and Madhu show up and they're like talking to them and they're really like dragging Kajol and Amir Khan over the coals. They're like, what are you? Well, you having another abortion? Are you fucking her again? And it's like, what? Why do you believe the people in your life that are so clearly up to no good that they're willing to ruin your wedding to prove a point? Like, again, like that for me, I think is the big takeaway for this movie, is the characters are not written realistically, but they're in a movie where the expectation is realism. But then it's not. And that's the problem. Like the movie doesn't know what it wants to be at all. I think it wants to be at times a funny look at the way people interact with each other and the way this group and age range of people are interacting with each other in the late 90s and Indian culture in the late 90s and the expectations between parents and kids. Like that's an interesting thing to talk about. They talk about it in DDLJ. They talk about it in K3G. They talk about it in Kuch Kuch Hota Hai. And this movie has nothing to add to the conversation. All it says is, well, yeah, your parents are bad, but I guess you're going to forgive them in the end. Like, and that's the thing. Like, this movie has an opportunity to really at the end say, nah, fuck this. It's not okay. Like you said, the movie should have taken a stance. And instead, the movie just goes, no. You're going to forgive your parents in the end either way. And it's like, that's toxic. And the movie really kind of standing at the end of the movie and being like, well, see, they're going to forgive everybody. It's like, no. Like, wrong message movie. Wrong message in 1997. 2023 notwithstanding. 1997, what message are you sending by saying, well, if your parents try to literally kill you, I guess you should still forgive them? I don't think so.
Yeah. No, there's a huge oceans of difference between relatives and family.
Yeah.
And and plus, like, I kept thinking there was going to be like more of a downfall because you have like the scene near the beginning with the shouty man with
Ranjit Rai, aka Shouty Man,
where his brother, or no, it's with Lex Luthor. His actual brother comes by and informs him that his daughter has gotten married, and he's like, "Oh, why didn't you tell me?" And he finds out that his niece married the son of their driver, and he is disgusted. He literally says, "If my daughter ever married beneath her or married a poor, I would shoot her." He literally says, "I would shoot her," and his brother gets rightfully pissed at him because his brother's not a bunghole and says, basically, just remember everything in life has a downfall. The sun turns into the moon. Yeah, it has all these other great metaphors. And then, and I did love this moment. And this actor was so good with this line where he says, "May God bless you." And he's saying it in the most, I'm not blessing you. You better be praying to God when your downfall comes, because it's going to come hard. And I was like, ooh, it's like a Chekhov's gun thing. Like, he's going to end up like losing his money because he's boastful and prideful, and that never happened. Like, how was he punished? That's the other thing, is neither one of the fathers
at all
filmed it to have like almost, because the film even opens with like a voiceover narration, like you would associate almost with like, and I kind of use this with Muthu, almost like a fairy tale.
Right.
Like something more fanciful, something more, good versus evil kind of tone. And how is evil fought in this movie? It's not. And
it's welcomed back in with open arms is what it feels like, which is it just undercuts the entire emotional core of the movie, that the movie ends with our two leads, or I guess four leads, forgiving everyone involved explicitly. It doesn't work. Like, it hurts the movie. In the last, when the movie has an opportunity to really take a stand, the movie, it just, no, just don't. It's not that it doesn't care or that it doesn't have the ability to address the situation that it put itself in. It just chooses not to, is what it feels like. It just decides that, I guess it is okay that this happened and that we all learned a lesson in the end. It's like that. This is a different movie. In DDLJ, Amrish Puri plays Kajol's father, and he is just not wanting her to throw her life away on someone that he doesn't approve of. But he never tries to kill her because she is, going against his wishes. And that is such a huge jump. I mean, that's a Grand Canyon leap to go from I'm your parent and I don't approve of what you're doing to I'm your parent and you're going to die for it. Like, what? That's such a giant leap that the movie treats so lightly. That, again, it's the other contemporary films that this movie was coming out with. Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, K3G, DDLJ. It's telling the same story that those movies are. Parents and kids at odds with one another about their lifestyle choices and expectations. This movie just goes, what's the next logical step? They're actually literally trying to kill one another. But it doesn't work when it's told this way. It just doesn't. And maybe it would have worked better if there hadn't been four people on screen. I don't know. It feels like the issue with this movie is what the movie is trying to show us, not how it does it. Like, the movie, I think, is perfectly fine. It's a well-made movie. I just think the movie's ideas and machinations are so misguided that it ultimately feels just like a real strange mix of things that does not really ever come together as a singular unified movie. It just feels like a bunch of disparate parts jammed into 2 hours and 48 minutes worth of a runtime.
Yeah. Well, and the thing too is like, I mean, there are movies that can have kind of a cynical ending where, I mean, because, I mean, it's not to sound super negative, but I mean, a lot of times in real life, there are people that get away with horrible stuff, and they're usually 99% of the time, usually, in a position of power,
Right.
whether it's financial power or, an authority, job position, whatever. But films that have that kind of like cynical sort of big ugliness about them have that kind of dark vein all throughout it.
Right.
And you kind of need to, like, it's really, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's really hard to pull off something very funny, almost surreal at times with how crazy the antics get. And then all of a sudden it's like, by the way, the evil people that almost got one girl raped, almost killed their kids, almost had, his daughters, her one true love, shipped off to Nigeria against his will after he was beaten, almost to death in a jail cell. Like, they're fine. It's, because they're their fathers and you love your, no, you don't. Not if that's your father.
Right.
Like, you don't. Nobody has to love their parents if their parents are terrible. And that's a
word.
That's a fact. That's our PSA here on the BCC. But no, I mean, I will say, like, I think you're right. I think it is a well-made movie. You could definitely do a lot worse.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have done a lot worse than this movie. I know I have. But and the cast, I did love the four leads. I think all four of them were great because this is the first time I've seen 3 out of 4 of these actors. I don't think I've seen the other 3 in other films because I'm still very much, getting my feet wet in this world, which is awesome, and I really appreciate it, Chris.
Of course, you're welcome.
And I'm highly I can't wait. Even like when we're watching something that's not, like A++. I mean, why should anybody expect that? Like any type of film at all, whatever country it's from, genre, it's a journey. Some roads are going to be bumpy, some are going to be smooth, some are going to lead you to a perfect vacation spot. Others are going to be a Motel 6 that has a crack pipe underneath the bed. Everything's different. And that's part of the fun of taking any kind of, and yeah, I mean, you get to see 4 leads that are charismatic. They do have great chemistry with each other. And there's some good musical numbers. I will say the first one we see is with a really beautiful young lady that never shows up in the movie again. What was up with that? What was her name? Layla?
Yeah. I mean, I would assume she's an actress and a model, and she's just a cameo. Why not?
I mean, she's gorgeous.
Yeah. It's like in when Mike and I did China Gate, the actress who is dancing is on the cover of the box. Movie has nothing to do with her. She shows up in one scene. And it was like, wait, hold on a second. This movie is not that. But I like the musical numbers. I like the one where Amir Khan is wearing that orange suit and walking around. I guess that's the Mr. Lover one. That's the same one. He looks hilarious in that orange suit walking around.
Oh, and also this is the 3rd Amir Khan movie you talked about, at least where we see him working out.
Oh, well, it is Amir Khan.
That's not a complaint.
But you know what's funny? This movie, I would contend that Amir Khan is second lead to Ajay Devgan. Like, right? Like, he's not the main character. He's the sidekick in this movie.
He 100%. And Ajay's great. Like, I enjoyed him. He's got, this is a total superficial note. I really liked his hair.
He has great screen presence.
He does. Now, he's very likable too. Like, that's the thing too, because you think like, oh God, are the rich kids going to be kind of obnoxious? And it's like, no, like Madhu's kind of bratty, but she's, until this latter part of the film, it's a really good friend. Like, she's really sweet to her friend, isn't concerned about the whole class perception, things like her father. Neither one of them are, right. Like, it doesn't even enter their minds. And, which is nice. And no, the musical numbers are great. I think Mr. Lover, man, that actor, even, and I agree, I love Amitabh, and I'm looking forward to seeing more stuff with Amitabh in it. But the actor playing the uncle or brother-in-law doing that with the little like leather jacket, that dude has some moves. Like, he looks like, you look at him, you're not going to think this guy can dance, but man,
he can dance.
He can get it.
Yeah.
He can 100% get it.
I really appreciate, anytime we watch these movies and we get some really well choreographed, well thought out musical numbers. Not a requirement, mind you, but anytime they're well done, I always appreciate it. And it doesn't feel like the movie is cramming it in there where it doesn't need to be. The musical numbers, I think, work in this movie completely. I think they're, in some respects, maybe even the best parts of the movie, frankly. because again, like you can see the amount of time and effort that went into the choreography and just the musical numbers in general. And Anu Malik does a great job, I think, with composing all of the songs. Like you said, the Mr. Lover Lover, I think, is the standout song, I would think, out of all of them.
100%. I love it. It's really, and it's one of those, it's a good song when it's still in your head and you're not mad about it.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, this is very much a movie that is riding the line between a film like Doom, which is Amitabh's son playing a cop chasing after a thief, but also there's like a love story with his partner and another woman. It's kind of there, but then it's more a romantic movie. Like, this movie wants to be an action movie. I really think it does, because it feels like at times it's really trying to do something more with the rom-com genre than just a battle of words between the characters, as opposed to a battle of actual physical aggression, because most rom-coms, you don't have characters coming to actual blows. It's normally just verbal disagreements. So the fact that they kind of take it to that next step, I just don't think it really works, because the movie didn't prepare us or itself for that tone shift. And it never really internalizes that it's done something different that it can't undo. It has made this movie into an action movie at some point, and then it tries to back off of that, and it doesn't work. It needs to have fully committed to it, because it feels like it wants to. And I don't think it wouldn't have been successful if it had, because some of the scenes in the movie that are more action oriented, like when the guy is getting his dick stomped, or that whole chase through the alleys, it's rather interesting. It just feels so tonally strained, and the stakes are just so elevated all of a sudden. Like, again, someone screaming at someone is a lot different than someone pointing a gun at someone and saying, "I'm going to fucking shoot you in the head." Someone yelling at you is not going to kill you, but someone shooting you in the head damn sure will. So you can't put those next to each other and say these are equal. You have to understand that, like, one is obviously a lot more drastic than the other. I just feel like the movie gets lost in trying to, I guess, it doesn't feel like it's ignoring it. It just doesn't want us to care that it's doing it.
Mm-hmm. But you're going to, because especially you're seeing horrible things happen to characters that you've spent a lot of time with, and that are likable characters that are, people, you want good things to happen to them. And it's okay to kind of have some suffering happen, because, that's life. But like, I mean, it's like, how do you go from a statue with a butt that's facing the front to police brutality?
To then having your characters forgive the characters that tried to murder them throughout the...
Yeah.
That, I think, is the unforgivable sin of the movie for me, is the way the movie treats the story it takes us on. In the end, it just goes, the story we're telling you ultimately doesn't matter. Like, nobody learned anything. It is what it kind of feels like. Yeah. Like, what did they learn? Because they didn't learn that their parents were terrible, which is what they should have learned, given that their parents were literally trying to kill them. So weird signaling from the movie is kind of more what I'm getting at. The movie just doesn't know what it wants to say, even though it's clearly has something to say.
Yeah. So would you say that your final feeling of Ishq is Ish?
Yeah, it's all right. I think you could, like you said, I think you could do better for 2 hours and 48 minutes, but middle of the road, it's better. It's more successful than it is not, but I don't think it's as successful as it thinks it is.
Yeah, I agree. That's beautifully put. Suck on that, Ebert. No.
Yeah.
He's dead. I'm sorry. I'm haunted down. Sorry.
He's I like that. He's dead. Never mind.
Oh, yeah. I feel terrible now. But I won't feel terrible if that means I get pranked by Amir Khan.
That's fair. And hey, you know what? If anything, this movie seemingly led to Ajay Devgan and Kajol getting married 2 years later. So, and they've been married ever since. So there you go.
That's so sweet. So yeah. If anything from this film, even if it's got issues, true love absolutely blame from it. And I think that's awesome. And both of them are great. I definitely am looking forward to seeing some movies with the rest of this cast in it, because I liked all the main actors.
Yeah, Amir. I mean, as good as Amir Khan is, like, I think Ajay Devgan really steals the show. And I haven't seen him in anything else either. He was in Triple R in like an extended cameo, but I have not seen him in anything. So I'm with you. I'm kind of excited to maybe go watch a movie where he is just the lead and he's not having to share it with Amir Khan. Because again, like you're sharing the screen with Amir Khan. Like, good luck.
Oh, yeah.
So again, 1997 Amir Khan is very different than 2023 Amir Khan, but he was a rising star then. So it's not like people didn't know his value. I just don't think anybody thought, well, he's going to be ostensibly one of the biggest movie stars in the world. So that ends up being his ceiling. I just don't know if anybody knew that's what his ceiling was. If he even, I guess he even has a ceiling, frankly. So when you're being widely regarded as one of the most well-known Indian stars, like that's not a ceiling. Like that's just Amir Khan.
Exactly. He's in the absolute stratosphere of universal stardom.
Yeah, which is not like I'm not even sure that there are American actors that have the same international appeal that Amir Khan does.
No.
Like, I don't know if there are people in China and India that are super into Tom Cruise the way people in China are into Amir Khan. So,
yeah, I mean, nobody's using any of our actors as like diplomatic influencers.
No, unless you're Sean Penn and then you're just doing it yourself. And everybody's like, Sean, would you like go away? Nobody cares.
You're part of the problem. I mean, well,
but dude, like leave. So yeah, I guess, Heather, I guess we've kind of given our final thoughts on Ishq already. So, it's on YouTube. Go check it out. It's free. Most Indian cinema on YouTube's free. This just happens to have subtitles, which, again, that is few and far between, but much appreciated, obviously.
Oh, greatly appreciate. Yeah, can we give some just big-hearted love to whoever put the subtitles on it? Thank you, sir or ma'am or they. We love you.
Yeah. So until the next time you join me on the Bollywood Cinema Club, Heather, where can people find you and your body of work?
Well, you can find me, of course, at my website, monoheather.com, as well as my Twitter and Instagram and Facebook under @MondoHeather. And I have a Patreon, and it's going to shock you. It's also under @MondoHeather.
Shocking. I never would have guessed.
Shock.
As for this show, BollywoodCinemaClub.com is where you can find this show, but WeirdingWayMedia.com is where you can go to find all the episodes of the Bollywood Cinema Club, the Culture Cast, Noise Junkies, the new show that Heather and Father Malone and HP are on together. So that's where you can go to find all of that stuff, including this show. So yeah, rate, review, and like on iTunes. Leave us a positive rating if you enjoy it. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everybody. Go watch Indian cinema. That's the goal here. Listen to the show and watch Indian cinema, because even if these movies are weird, they're still entertaining. They're still a fun, 2.5 hour romp.
Absolutely. I think if you love cinema and if you're listening to us talk about it, clearly you do, and you're one of us. So welcome. Yeah, please, check it out, because even the worst film that Chris and I have talked about wasn't the worst film.
Is it still Gulam? Or is that I guess, what do we end? Let's end this episode on that question. Like, is this better or worse? Because I think Gulam is the one that neither one of us were completely on board with. Is this better or worse than Gulam?
I'm torn. I think Gulam tonally, I think it's more consistently well made.
It hangs together more as like a unified idea. But
the parts that I did enjoy about Ishq, I think I enjoyed more than the parts I enjoyed about Gulam, if that makes any sense.
I agree. Even I would say that the music in Gulam was better. That Kandala song, I think, is more stuck in my head than Mr. Lava Lava is. But I think Ishq has higher highs than Gulam's highs. It has much lower lows, I think. But I think the highs are so high that I can kind of overlook the lows, which, ultimately 2 hours and 48 minutes. That Gulam is more or less the same length. So you're kind of right there either way. So
right. Well, and that's the thing, is I think people get so used to just seeing, like, binging the same old stuff that's familiar to them. But, it's like food. If you eat the same thing every day, you're going to get bored, and it's not going to be the best thing for your spirit or your body.
Right.
So, watch some Bollywood, and not just Triple R, though I do need to see it. It sounds amazing.
It is amazing.
There's a whole universe here of Indian cinema. I mean, I'm just barely getting my toes in the water, given how much stuff is out there, and I'm already loving this journey so much. So please, do so. Life is short. Make it fun, make it interesting, make it weird.
And we'll catch you on the next episode.